Saving the summit. A top aide to Kim Jong-un delivers a letter from the North Korean leader to President Donald Trump. Round 2. Pope Francis meets with more victims of clergy sex abuse in Chile. We're at the Vatican. New beginning. A Catholic parish in Texas devastated by Hurricane Harvey reopens. And a teen champ. We introduce you to this year's winner of the National Spelling Bee on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, June 1st, 2018.
Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. President Trump announces his historic summit with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un is back on. The goal of the June 12th meeting is to denuclearize the Korean peninsula. It comes after the president met with a top North Korean official today at the White House. And that's where we find correspondent Mark Irons. Mark?
Wyatt, today's meeting with Kim Jong-un's right-hand man, Kim Young-chol, lasted over an hour inside the Oval Office. The president says the summit, which he previously canceled, will still take place in Singapore, and it could be the start of the peace process with North Korea.
I think it'll be a process. It's not, I never said it goes in one meeting. I think it's going to be a process, but the relationships are building, and that's a very positive thing.
The visit today marks the first time in 18 years a top North Korean official has visited the White House. After the meeting, the president sounding optimistic that Kim Jong-un is committed to ending his nuclear weapons program.
I think they want to do that. I know they want to do that. They want other things along the line. They want to develop as a country. That's going to happen, I have no doubt.
President Trump says he did not expect their meeting to go as long as it did, but they had a lot to talk about. The North Korean official came to the White House to personally deliver a letter from Kim Jong-un to President Trump. The president joked with reporters that he may be in for a surprise when he opens that letter from Kim, but he did seem optimistic they can reach a deal going forward. He also announced he won't impose any additional sanctions on North Korea while the two sides continue to talk. Wyatt?
And if they do hold this summit, as you say, on June 12th, it'll be an interesting one. White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. Good news on the economy. Unemployment drops to 3.8%, the lowest rate in 18 years. For African Americans, it hit a record low of 5.9%. Employers added 223,000 jobs last month. That number exceeded expectations. Wages also grew. They're up nearly 3% more than last year. The Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis announces a $210 million settlement with victims of clergy sex abuse. The Archbishop also apologizes to the 450 victims.
Relationships with family and friends, relationships in your parishes and communities were harmed. Lives were forever changed. The church let you down. I'm very sorry.
It is the second largest payout in the church's abuse scandal. Insurance companies will pay roughly $170 million. The Archdiocese filed for bankruptcy in 2015. Meanwhile, the Archdiocese of St. Louis will not reassign a priest twice accused of misconduct with children to a new parish. It comes in response to parents' concerns. Instead, Father Joseph Jang will remain at the city's cathedral basilica. He denies the accusations. Socialist Party leader Pedro Sanchez is the new Prime Minister of Spain after a no-confidence vote unseats the conservative government. Today, the country's parliament welcomed the news. Mariano Rajoy steered the country out of its economic crisis in 2011, but last week his party was found guilty of corruption. Sanchez says he will address social emergencies following years of austerity measures. And in Italy, Western Europe's first populist government is sworn in. It promises an Italy-first agenda that has alarmed Europe's political establishment. The ceremony capped a roller coaster week of political and financial turmoil. An attack on a Catholic university in Nicaragua is the latest in a wave of violence in the country. More than 80 people have been killed in protests since April. The unrest was sparked by President Daniel Ortega's plan to raise taxes and slash benefits. The latter shelved the plan. The Catholic Church is mediating peace talks. A Franciscan priest in Syria is calling on world leaders to bring peace to the country. Father Ibrahim of Damascus says the international community, not local officials, holds the key to a lasting solution. Syria's civil war began in 2011. More than 500,000 people have been killed. A second group of sex abuse victims from Chile are meeting with Pope Francis in the Vatican starting today. The group includes 5 priests who were sexually and psychologically abused by Father Fernando Caradima. The meetings are a part of the Holy Father's effort to turn the Chilean church around after he publicly defended a Chilean bishop accused of ignoring Caradima's abuse. For more on the meetings, we go to Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley, who joins us from Rome. Juliet, how important is this new round of talks in the ongoing Chile sex abuse crisis?
Wyatt, this is another very strong statement by Pope Francis showing his commitment to dealing head-on with this crisis. He's focusing very heavily on the victims. In April, he met a first group of abuse survivors, and they were generally very encouraged by those meetings. The novelty here is that the survivors are not lay people, but clergy members.
Interesting. So yesterday, Pope Francis sent a letter to Catholics in Chile denouncing for the first time what he calls a culture of cover-up and abuse. Tell us more about the letter.
It was an 8-page pastoral letter, Wyatt, to the faithful, in which Pope Francis said very forcefully, quote, "never again," referring to the church's culture of abuse and the system that allowed it to fester. The Holy Father said there is a need now to work together to generate a culture of care in the way that the church and its followers relate to one another, to power and to money. Francis thanked the victims for their, quote, valiant perseverance in denouncing the abuse and in searching for the truth.
Okay, so now noting those letters' contents and thinking about these meetings that are going forward, what can we expect now looking ahead?
Wyatt, we're still waiting for the Pope to act on the resignation of all the Chilean bishops. He can accept those resignations or delay the decision. Also, the Vatican has sent back a team of investigators to Chile to continue the probe. Now, let me add that this letter by Pope Francis is significant because it marks the first time a Pope has spoken publicly of a culture of cover-up within the church. The Holy Father included himself among the guilty in failing to listen to the victims and to take a stance. Now, this reform was begun by Pope Benedict, as you remember, who also issued a letter to the faithful of Ireland in 2010 in the wake of the sex abuse scandal.
So interesting to hear the strong language by Pope Francis. It's clear he takes the situation very seriously and will continue to. Juliet Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wyatt. Thank you.
Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI welcomes a few visitors today from his homeland. The retired pontiff, who is from Bavaria, met with the minister of the German state. The German delegation also met with Pope Francis.
Coming up, a church in Texas destroyed by Hurricane Harvey begins a new chapter. And we talk with a retired Marine back from a different kind of mission.
Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. A group of campaigners are putting pressure on Northern Ireland to ease its strict abortion ban. Protesters went as far as to pass out what they claim are abortion pills yesterday and even made a show of swallowing them outside of a Belfast court. It comes after Northern Ireland's neighbor, the Republic of Ireland, voted to repeal their pro-life constitutional amendment last week. A judge temporarily blocks the United States' most pro-life law. Iowa's heartbeat bill, which banned abortion once a heartbeat is detected, was set to take effect next month. But groups like Planned Parenthood argue the law is unconstitutional. An attorney representing the state says the goal now is to quickly get the case before a judge so the state can argue the law is constitutional. Lourdes, a town in southwestern France, is one of the most popular Catholic Marian shrines in the world. It's the site where Our Lady appeared to St. Bernadette in the 19th century. For the past 5 years, the Knights of Columbus have worked with the Archdiocese for Military Services, USA, to sponsor the annual Warriors to Lourdes pilgrimage. The trip is an opportunity for service members and their families to rest, pray, and ask for healing. Joining me now is Colonel Chuck Galena, who retired from the Marine Corps after 30 years of active duty. Colonel Galena also works with the Knights of Columbus and helped organize this year's pilgrimage. Colonel Galena, Chuck, thanks for coming on the show first off. You say no one comes out of battle unaffected. Tell me how this trip to Lourdes really is a place of healing for so many members of the military.
that there is a saying that there are no unwounded warriors in battle. And we see that reflected in the, not just the physical wounds of war, but very much so in the emotional, spiritual, and moral wounds of war. We're a very Christian, Catholic military in many ways, and we see this reflected in the guilt that many of our warriors carry with them when they come out. Lourdes is a natural place of healing. It's a natural place for us to take our wounded, ill, and injured. Certainly the 66 confirmed miracles on the physical healing, but to me, the real strength, the real healing of Lourdes through the Blessed Mother is this spiritual healing, this moral courage that we seem to see in our warriors that helps them then address their physical wounds, the guilt feelings or the emotional issues that impact their lives, their marriages, and so forth. It's a powerful, powerful feeling.
I'm hoping you can cite an example, because there are so many people who go there and feel like they've gone through a transformation before and after the pilgrimage. Tell us about maybe some people that you've met.
We have a young man with us this year who is suffering terminal 4 brain cancer. He came, and in his own words, I came for healing, physical healing of my side and my speech, but I found spiritual healing and courage for the journey, and that is more important than the physical.
You know, this pilgrimage unites members of the military, from across the country, in many cases from across the world. How do you think sort of this global fellowship sort of strengthens them as a community?
Warriors are warriors, depending on no matter what nation we're talking about. But in this case, we had 14,000 military personnel from 50 nations. We had 217 of our own wounded, ill, and injured with their caregivers. They come together in camaraderie. They come together in unity. This year was Pentecost. And in the words of one of our chaplains, to see the Pentecost Mass celebrated with all of these military members from all of these nations, what a powerful example of the ability to reach out in peace to one another. From our own military personnel, using the words of our Supreme Knight in terms of the relationship of the Knights of Columbus to the military, what greater act of charity, one of our most powerful principles, than giving one's life to a friend? What greater unity than the band of brothers and then the fraternity that takes place within that?
And of course, this is not the first time that the Knights of Columbus have sponsored or helped the U.S. military in this way. How else did the Knights of Columbus help members of the military or former members of the military?
We have been supporting the military effectively since 1919 and World War I. In fact, the tie I'm wearing is the emblems of the Knights of Columbus in World War I. We operated a hospitality center in Lourdes, and the very first military pilgrimage of any kind was 3,000 members of the American Expeditionary Force who came to Lourdes, and the Knights of Columbus were there to organize to help them with their billeting and lodging, much the same way we're doing today. So we've really returned to Lourdes. The Armed with the Faith prayer book, over 600,000 copies we've given out to that. The direct support to the Archdiocese of the Military Services, especially the co-sponsored seminarian program, and Archbishop Broglio directly, and his bishops. All of these things are part of our understanding that the values and principles of our armed forces match and meet the principles of the Knights of Columbus. And so it's a natural unity between the Knights and the support of our military.
It's so interesting to hear about the outreach that you guys do, as well as the experience of members of the military who have gone to Lourdes. Colonel Chuck Galena, military advisor for the Knights of Columbus, thanks so much for talking with us.
Well, it was my pleasure to do that. Thank you very much.
Parishioners of a Catholic church outside of Houston are back in the pews tonight, 9 months after Hurricane Harvey devastated the Gulf Coast of Texas. You may remember when I reported on the aftermath last August. Tonight we're happy to take you back to St. Ignatius of Loyola, which is celebrating its reopening.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
The shepherd of the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston joined dozens of clergy members and parishioners at St. Ignatius of Loyola. Cardinal Daniel DiNardo rededicated the church Thursday evening.
You are the stones in the body of Christ.
Cardinal DiNardo offering encouragement during his homily to a community of 4,000 families. The parish was left without a home for 9 months. In August of 2017, this sanctuary was inundated with water after Hurricane Harvey hit the greater Houston area. All of the city's bayous flooded, dumping smelly, dirty water into homes, offices, and places of worship. At the time, the only way our team could get there was by boat.
Is the chapel still flooded?
Yeah.
The pastor, Father Norbert Meduja, shows us how far the parish has come while reflecting on the disaster.
So the water was as high as the top of the pews, came up this high.
Father Norbert says his parish spent the last 9 months celebrating Mass at gyms, neighboring churches, and a tent, all while working to get the church back open.
And people didn't really understand the importance of what it meant to have a home as a faith community. It's not just having a sacrament, but it's also the physical locale that is made holy. And so for me, it's really deepened my trust in God, that God is with me and that as a pastor, the Good Shepherd is accompanying me.
The faithful say they feel blessed to be part of the church's new beginning.
The service was absolutely beautiful, and I really felt the presence of the Holy Spirit here tonight. The community was gathered again, and it felt amazing.
It was very moving seeing all the people coming in, all the excitement, all of the priests that were here, just all of the support from the community above and beyond our own parishioners.
Welcome home.
Parishioners say they don't need a structure to worship as the body of Christ, but it's nice to have a physical church to call home again. Up next, finding beauty in the broken places. Author Allison Pataki tells us how faith got her through the toughest of circumstances. And a Texas team comes out on top.
Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. A new book is taking an honest look at the road to recovery following serious illness. Beauty in the Broken Places, a memoir of love, faith, and resilience, was released in May. Earlier this week, Lauren Ashburn talked with the author.
Joining me now is Allison Pataki. Allison, welcome to the program. So nice to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
The last time I saw you was for your first book. This book touched my heart. You were on your way to a vacation in Hawaii, and suddenly your life changed. Walk us through that moment on the plane.
Yeah, so my husband and I, we were 30 years old. We were expecting our first child. And on the plane, my husband, who at the time was a young, healthy doctor, athlete, lifelong athlete, he lost consciousness. He slipped into a coma at 35,000 feet in the air. He had a massive stroke, and our life as we knew it had been completely derailed in the blink of an eye. And that began the process of his healing, and also what turned into eventually this written project that I worked on over the course of my husband's recovery from near death.
In one of your early letters to your husband, Dave, you write, "I sat on the plane clutching your shoe, still warm from the blood that pumps through your veins, thinking that when this shoe goes cold, I might never touch another piece of clothing that is warm from Dave's body again." How did your love for Dave give you strength throughout this process? He had amnesia. Did you know if you'd ever be able to connect with him again?
I didn't, and nobody could tell me, not even a world-class neurologist could tell me when Dave woke up, if he would ever come back to me, how he would come back to me. He woke up in a state of complete amnesia. And so I was writing these letters as if I was speaking to Dave, and I was trying to provide him with the memories that I knew he wasn't making and couldn't make. And so I wrote these letters nightly to him, sort of as a benchmark for him to have a memory from each day and for me to remember it each day.
You talk about whatever you think it is that I'm doing, I'm barely coping. You talk about the trials and the tears and the meltdown, but you also talk about your reliance on faith during this journey, saying making it through life with only science and proven facts to depend on would seem to me like gliding over a ravine without a safety harness. How has your faith enabled you to navigate what you describe as your new normal?
In some of the darkest moments, which became just a part of our reality, when I didn't know if I would get my husband back, I didn't know if I would be raising my daughter as a widow or with a severely impaired husband, and certainly not the life we had planned on and worked toward and hoped for, I realized that those were really the moments when my faith got real and my relationship with God got real. And then I realized in these moments when Dave and I were at our lowest and when it was scary, that was really when I needed faith for the first time. Prior to that, it hadn't really been faith I had been operating on. It had been just sort of agreeing with the overwhelming evidence. God had been good. Life had been good. We had worked hard and things had gone more or less our way. This was the first time where I realized, can I keep my faith and say God is good, and I have faith that He's in control and that He is working towards the good and weaving something here for us that I can't understand, precisely in the moments when things don't look good, when things are scary, when I'm afraid, when I'm sad, when I don't understand. That was when I really had to fall back and rely on something that was much greater than myself, and that was my faith.
Before we go, tell us about Dave. How's he doing?
So Dave is doing wonderfully well. He's back to himself. We had our daughter, we had our newborn in the midst of his recovery, and she was just a joy and a miracle and a light for both of us. And so we have this kind of new perspective in our family where we just appreciate every day and we appreciate one another. And Dave feels like he got a second chance at life from having fought his way back from near death. And so it fills us just with sort of a gratitude and an appreciation. And thank you. He's doing very well.
I'm so glad. Thank you for joining us, for telling us your story. Allison Pataki, author of Beauty in the Broken Places.
Thank you.
And our thanks to Lauren for that powerful interview. The Vatican says when playing sports, a Christian perspective can help athletes give their best.
We need to be careful that we don't go overboard or become excessive. And that would show itself if we start to, for example, not see the humanity in the players on the other team, or the fans.
Father Patrick Kelly spoke today in the Vatican about a new letter about faith and sports. The message, even the soccer field or the basketball court can be a place for announcing Christ's message. Venezuela celebrates the Feast of Corpus Christi using a 200-year-old ritual. Catholic priests and Spanish conquerors first introduced the Dancing Devils, a celebration that combines tradition and folklore. The festival concludes when the dozens dressed up make their way to the cemetery. There they pay respects to loved ones who have died. Pope Francis is preparing to lead the Corpus Christi procession this weekend. He's doing it this year in the city of Ostia, just south of Rome. The feast celebrates the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. You can see the celebration this Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern right here on EWTN. Finally tonight, a 14-year-old boy from outside Dallas, Texas is crowned this year's winner of the Scripps National Spelling Bee, and it all came down to a word meaning Christian fellowship.
Koinonia. Koinonia. Koinonia.
That is correct.
Karthik Nemani correctly spelled koinonia, beating more than 500 other participants. Karthik is the 14th consecutive Indian American champion. In addition to the trophy, he gets more than $40,000 in cash and prizes. Congratulations to Karthik and his family. Those spelling bees are always fun to watch on TV. And with that, we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.